Welcome everybody to Trapunto the Floriani Way, a new approach to Trapunto and the hoop. I'm your host Mark Garretts, and I'm going to be your instructor for this video. And I just wanted to take a few seconds and talk about how Trapunto was done traditionally. Trapunto designs were created by stitching the outline of the raised area, or the trapunto effect. Then once the block was done, you'd cut a slit in the backing material, then you'd stuff the area with extra batting, and then you'd usually by hand stitch up the slit. When quilters started to use their embroidery machines to create quilt blocks, a new method of creating trapunto on the hoop was invented. This method basically consists of treating the extra batting just like it was an applique. A placement line is stitched, the extra batting is placed over the placement line, and then it's tacked down by another set of stitches. You remove the hoop from the machine, and then you carefully trim the extra batting away. The hoop is reattached to the machine, the top fabric's laid in place, and the rest of the design is stitched. When using a similar technique for applique, trimming the fabric is not easy, but when you trim batting away from the base batting, it's even harder because the point of the scissors really wants to get caught in the batting. So Floriani solved the problem of trimming fabric when doing an applique with the introduction of Applique Wonder. Applique Wonder is a unique product that has a fusible layer on both sides, and one of the sides also has a pressure-sensitive adhesive layer covered by a protective paper layer. It's also very lightweight, so you can't even tell it's there when the item is finished. When used with applique, you print or draw your applique outline on the paper side in reverse, since it will be the bottom. Next, you iron the exposed fusible side onto your applique fabric. Now, using the outline on the paper side as a guide, you can cut your applique to the exact shape, and you can do it out in the air and not trying to do it fussy cutting inside the hoop. You peel the paper backing away, which reveals the adhesive layer, then you attach it to the fabric using the placement lines as a guide, and you put the hoop back in the machine and complete your applique. So you don't have to do any fussy trimming in the hoop, like I said. It occurred to me that the same technique could be used with trapunto in the hoop, so I gave it a try. It works great, and that's what we're going to learn in this set of the lessons. The first part will cover how to create an in-the-hoop trapunto block with all the necessary placement lines, and also how to create an artwork page for printing on our Applique Wonder. The second part will consist of the assembly instructions for actually sewing out the block. It's a fairly simple block consisting of a feather design with some micro stippling around it. You can make it as is, or you can use the concepts in these lessons to create your own block. So let's get started. Okay, we're going to begin creating this trapunto in the hoop the Floriani Way quilt block. We've already opened my decorative quilter, and the first thing we're going to do is click on the Create New Page icon, which is right up here. So I've clicked that and I've created a new page. Then we're going to come to our grid, and our ruler rather, and we're just going to make sure it's in inches, so I can see that it is right here, but if it's not, I want you just to right click on it and make sure that inches is selected. We're going to come over here to Tools, we're going to select General Options, we're going to come down to Grid again, make sure Snap to Grid is turned off, and under Digitizing that we are in Simple Draw mode. And then we're going to click OK when we have verified that our initial settings are correct. We're going to create a block, and it's going to be a simple square. And I could draw a square, but instead I'm just going to use the Select Block function here because I know I have a basic square in here. So I'm going to select this block icon. I'm going to select Basic, and I'm going to scroll down here and select the square block. And before I click OK, I'm actually going to resize it. I'm going to come over here to my size, and I'm going to change it to a 6 by 6 inch block, and then click OK to bring it in. And you can see now I've got this nice square block in here. The next thing I'm going to do is bring in my embellishment, and I'm going to do that by clicking on the embellishment icon. And I want the feathers, and I've got more than one feather page, which is indicated by this little plus sign here. By clicking on the feather plus sign, I get these 3 feather pages. The one I want's on page number 1, so I'm going to click feather 01. It's this block feather right here, so I'm going to click that. I'm going to click OK, and it's going to bring it in. Now we're just going to accept it at the size and placement that it brought it in at, but if you would like to change it, you certainly can. You can rotate it, resize it, do whatever you want to get the effect that you're after. The next thing we're going to do is we need to actually select the stitches. Now this came in as 2 elements. It came in as stitches as well as an automatic outline that's generated around the outside. And the outline is here in this deep blue, we'll just call it blue, and the stitches themselves are in the Floriani moss. Now this outline is great for what we want to use later, but we actually need another outline that defines the actual outline. This one is offset a little bit. We need one that's on the actual edge of the stitches for our placement line. So we're going to create that by selecting the stitches, just the stitches themselves, in our sequence view over here. And I'm going to create that outline by right-clicking on it, and I'm going to say Create Outline. It's going to ask me what distance I want. Now this one I want to hug it right there, so I'm going to click 0, and I'm going to say OK. That's going to create another artwork element here that's going to go right around it. Now to keep this separate so that we don't get it confused with the other artwork, I'm actually going to change its color to a different color that's down here in my palette. I'm going to use this purple number 8, and I'm going to change that color simply by right-clicking on number 8, and you can see now that the color over here is changed to number 8. Now we're going to need this piece of artwork for our Applique Wonder page that we're going to print. So what I'm going to do right now is make a copy of it. So I'm going to come up here to my copy icon. I'm going to click copy, and then I'm going to not paste it yet because I'm going to paste it on a brand new page. I'm going to do the new document icon, and I'm going to now click paste. And here is my artwork. And we're going to come back to this later because we're going to do some more manipulation of it, but I'm just going to save it just in case something happens and I need to go back to it. So I'm going to click File, Save. I could also click my Save icon right here. I'm going to put this in my Floriani design folder, so I'm going to navigate to my C drive. I'm going to come down here to Floriani and Designs, and I've already got a folder called My Decorative Quilter Blocks, and so I'm going to double click that. This is the one that will get created when you have downloaded this project, and you could put it here if you want. For now I'm going to create it here in the My Decorative Quilter Blocks. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Trapunto Feather. And I'm going to press enter to create that. I'm going to click open, and I'm going to call this Trapunto Feather Artwork. And I'm going to leave it in the C2S format because we're only ever going to print this. We're never going to stitch this file, so I don't need to save it in a machine format. So I'm going to click Save. And we're done with this for now, but we will come back to it. To get back to our design, come down here to your tabs at the very bottom and click on Design 1, which is where we were working. And now we're going to pick up where we left off with this design. Okay, so we're going to select the block, which is color number 9, which should be the first item here in our sequence view. I can come over here and click it, or I can just click it by selecting it in my sequence view. And we are going to need a copy of this because we're going to use that copy to create part of our placement line to show us where to put the fabric and also the batting. And so I'm going to copy and paste that. So I'm going to do that by clicking my copy and then paste icon. And now this item should open up, and you can see I've got 2 pieces of artwork here instead of 1. It doesn't look any different here because they're right on top of each other. and the second one should be selected. If it's not, go ahead and click it to select it. We're going to make a run stitch out of it. I'm going to do that by coming up here to my convert to run icon and simply clicking it, and you can now see that it is a run stitch. We're going to change its color to keep it separate, just like we did with the purple here. I want this to be black, however, and I don't have black down here in my palette. So I'm going to take this color number 4, this Navajo orange, and I'm going to make it black. And I'm going to do that by clicking on it. My color palette will open. I can click right here for black because I know that's where it is. I could also click in here number 900 and it will automatically select black for me. And so now I've got black in my palette. I'm going to again select my run, and I'm going to just simply right click on that now in order to change it into black. So I've got my run stitch now in black, and you can see that it's separated out as a separate item. Okay, and we are now going to come down here and create the rest of our outline, and I'm going to do that by clicking on the purple outline, which we created earlier, and I'm also going to change that into a run stitch by clicking my run, and I'm also going to change that to black by right clicking on the black. So now I've got two black elements. I've got the outline of the block and the outline of my feather. Okay, and what we're going to do now is we're going to create our micro stippling around the outside of my feather. And we're going to do that by selecting the first item in the sequence view, which is our block outline. That's still artwork, and in order to combine something, in order to create the micro stippling, I need to have two like elements. And I've got this artwork and this artwork right here, which is the original outline that came in with the feather. Before I do anything else, I've got one item selected. Look up here at my combine icon. It is not highlighted right now because there's nothing to combine. I only have one item selected. I'm going to select the color number 1, which is the third item down in my list, which again is my outline, my blue outline that came in with the artwork or the embellishment design. And I'm going to do that by first holding down my control key and then clicking on that third element. So now I've got them both selected, and you can see that my combine icon is now lit up because I now have two like elements that I can combine. So I'm going to click that to actually combine them, and when I do that, you can see that the one went away because they're now combined. And also I've knocked out the center of that design. So now when I apply my micro stippling out here, it won't encroach on the design area. And so that's exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to come over here to my stippling icon. I'm going to click it to convert that box around the outside to stippling. And this is a little gross for what we want to do. We want micro stippling. So I'm going to come over here and change both my stitch length and my density to both 2. And I'm going to click apply. And that is going to create a nice micro stippling effect that will mat down the batting around the outside of my feather in order to give me a lot of contrast here. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to create a border that goes around the outside of my block and also around the outside of my feather. And the reason I want to do that is twofold. Number one is I want to make a nice edge around the both sides of this stippling, so I want it to look very nice. And secondly, I'm going to use that border to actually attach my backing fabric to the design. So I have two reasons for doing it. I'm going to do that by right-clicking on this stippling design, and I'm going to say create border. Okay. And now you can see I've created a run stitch border, and that border is going to go both along the inside and the outside. I want this to be a little bit more defined, so I'm actually going to come up here and change my stitch length to 2 millimeters, which is what I like to use for quilting. And I'm also going to change it to a 2-ply, which will give me 2 passes of thread around the outside and the inside there. And I'm going to click apply to create that effect. Now the last thing I need to do to make this design complete is I need to actually change the sequence of how things are going to stitch out. I want my outside box to stitch out first, and I want my black to stitch out next, my black of the feather. They're both black. I want this to stitch out next. Then I want my complex fill to stitch out, and lastly I'm going to come and stitch out my actual feather design. So I am going to first come here to my second instance of black, which is the feather, and I'm going to click it. And I'm going to click the move to back icon, which is going to move it to stitch out first. And you know I said that I wanted that to stitch out second, because now I'm going to click on this one down here, my second instance of black now, and I'm going to also move it to the front, and that creates it in front of the feather. So now this is going to stitch out first, then my feather's going to stitch out, then my stippling, and then my Floriani moss is going to stitch out. Now what you can optionally do is you can change the colors of these last two items here to match what's going to be in your design. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave these alone, because what I want is I want actually a separate color for this one and a separate color for this one. I'm just going to, in my machine, select the color that I want by loading the proper thread. And I know that I want this to be a yellow, so I'm actually going to come over here and I'm going to change it to yellow by right-clicking on number 5, and I'm just going to leave this one as salmon. I haven't quite decided what color I want that to be yet, because I'm going to pick something that matches my fabric, because I want it to kind of disappear into the fabric. So I'm just going to leave it alone. I know that my machine's going to tell me to load this particular color, but I'll put a different thread on the spool when I stitch it out. So the last thing I need to do with this particular design is I need to take this run stitch border that we created and move it so that it sews out last, and that's actually considered the front of the sequence. And so I'm going to do that by clicking on it to select it, and then I am going to click my move to front icon, and you can see it moves it down here to the very last thing in our sequence to sew out. And I'm doing that for two reasons. One is because I want the machine to stop between these two color changes here so that I have a chance to attach the backing fabric, and this is going to be the stitches that holds our backing fabric to the quilt block, and it also creates a nice border, but it's going to serve those two purposes, and that's why we need it to sew out last. All that remains is for us to save the file. So now I'm going to click my save icon. I'm going to save it where I saved the last one in the My Decorative Quilter Blocks folder. Go back to my Trapunto Feather folder, and this one I'm going to call Trapunto, oops, I need to spell correctly, Trapunto Feather Block, since it's the block, and I'm going to save it in the C2S format. And it's always a good idea to save your files in the C2S format, because that retains the most information about the file. But now I also need to save it in a format that my machine knows how to read, and I'm going to click Save As, and I'm going to save it as a Brother Baby Lock Multi-Needle Pre-ES version 9, because that's the machine I'm actually going to sew this on. And so I'm going to click Save, and I am done with this part of the block. So that completes the block itself. We're now going to go back and play with the artwork. Okay, so I'm going to come back to my artwork page, and I'm going to click its tab, and remember, there's our artwork. Now we're going to print this on Applique Wonder. We need this image to be mirrored when we print it on the Applique Wonder, because that's going to be on the back side, and if we didn't mirror it, the applique would come out backwards, or not the applique, but the batting for the Trapunto would come out backwards. So we're going to mirror it simply by coming up here and clicking Flip Horizontal, and that is going to mirror the image for us. And now the idea is we could just print this out all by itself, but we would just have one of them on a page. And we probably want to use up as many of them on our Applique Wonder as we want. Now, if you're only doing one block, that's okay. If you're going to do multiple of the same block, which is what we're going to assume for this quilt, I'm going to show you how to print multiples on the page. If you were doing a different Trapunto block in different blocks, then you would simply copy and paste the artwork to the page just like we're going to do now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an artwork boundary that shows us where the page margins are. We're going to do that by coming up to our artwork tool and clicking on rectangle. Okay, and I'm going to draw a rectangle around my design. Now this is really not very important at all because we're going to change the size of it right now. I'm coming up here to my select icon. I'm clicking it, which will select my artwork. I'm going to come over here to my properties box, click the transform icon. I'm going to uncheck maintain aspect ratio because I want to independently adjust the width and the height. I'm going to make the width 8 inches and I'm going to make the height 10.5 inches. And the reason I've chosen those two particular dimensions is because 8 inches is the width of a standard piece of paper, leaving a 1/4 inch margin on each side. And so an 8.5 inch piece of paper width would be 8 inches if I take a 1/4 inch off each side. Similarly, 11 inches tall would be 10.5 inches. So that gives me a 1/4 inch margin so I don't get these too close to the edge. I'm going to double click my zoom tool, which again remember is a shortcut for fit everything on the page. So here is my original artwork and we've already flipped it. Now it's in purple. If I'm going to print to a black and white printer, it'll probably print okay in this color, but if I have a color inkjet, which most of them are, I'm going to probably want this to print in black. So I'm just going to change color number 8, this purple, into black, and I'm going to do that by left clicking on number 8, select black, and say OK, and now that item is black. I don't really care about this outside. It's going to be in blue. That's fine because I could actually delete it before I print because I really don't care about that. Now the idea is to fit as many of these on the page as I can. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to move it up here into the corner. And now I'm going to make a copy of it. So I'm going to do copy, paste, and it comes right over the top. So if I just click and drag, there's my second one, and I want to position it. If I put it right here, I can't really fit it on the page. I probably could get away with it, but I'm just going to move it down a little bit in here to give myself a little more room to move. I could fit a couple more on here, I think. So I'm going to actually just simply paste again. I've already got a copy up there, and I'm going to drag that one down and see where I can fit that. That goes right about there. And let me do one more. I'm going to click paste again and I'm going to drag it down here and see if I can get it to fit. Okay, that's just barely fitting in there. Okay, so I can do it that way and get 4 on there. I could move this one up into here probably. Let's just see if I can get a little more margin in here by doing that. Let me bring this over. That looks pretty good. So I could print it this way. It's hanging off just a touch there. Let me bring it over and bring this one over a little bit. And you can play with this as much as you want to get as many Trapunto designs as you can on the page. I'm going to just stop at 4 here, but you get the idea. Again, if you were to bring in a different design into here that you'd saved from a different file, you could just merge it in from another file or copy and paste it from that other file in so you could get different designs on the same page, again to maximize our Applique Wonder. Now to print this out, we would save this. So I've already saved it, so I've got a new version now, so I'm just going to save it again, and that's going to save it right over the top of the other one. And I'm going to come up here to my print icon, my print preview icon. I'm going to click that, and it's going to come up and show me what it's going to look like. In order, you may have this blank here, and that's because you need to go to your settings. For your settings, what you want here is you want actual size, you want in one page, and you want artworks selected. You can deselect everything else. Okay, so and you can change your margins if you want. I'm just going to leave it the way the defaults are, and but you want to make sure that artworks is selected. You want to make sure that your header is deselected, your footer is deselected, and it doesn't really matter if your stitches are selected or not because there isn't anything. And you can uncheck crosshairs and uncheck color analysis. Whatever's checked, what you want to end up with is these three check marks. Actual size is important in one page. You can have that on or off, doesn't matter, but artwork's definitely important in order to see it. You can see that if I unselect artwork and say OK, this is all going to disappear because there are actually no stitches on this page. So we want artworks to be selected, and that would print out. So you would just click print and send that to your printer. Make sure it's a inkjet printer. In this case it would be my Canon, and I would load my Applique Wonder into it and print on it. When you do that, make sure that you load the Applique Wonder with the shinier side of the paper to be the print side, however that goes in your printer. I know there's a tendency to want to print on the dull, rough side, but that will be the side that gets ironed onto your fabric, and then you won't be able to see your beautiful printing. So you want to make sure you print on the release paper, which is the back side. It's the shinier of the two sides. And that completes our software lessons for putting the Trapunto block and its associated artwork page together. In this section, we're going to step through the assembly instructions and the stitch out instructions for this particular block. The first thing we're going to do is print out our artwork file onto the Applique Wonder, and then we're going to cut a piece of batting that's about the same size as the sheet. Now if you don't want to do a whole sheet, you can cut out the individual pieces and use a smaller piece of batting. Next, you're going to actually iron the batting to the Applique Wonder. You want to do this by putting the batting down on your ironing surface and then the Applique Wonder on top with the printing facing up, and a press cloth on top of that, and then press the Applique Wonder to the batting for 2 to 3 seconds all over with a medium temperature iron until it's all well adhered. Once that's done, you're going to actually trim along the line and get a piece of the Trapunto extra batting as shown here in the picture. This one was kind of fiddly. It's not all that necessary to get exactly on the lines, but you want to get as close as you can. Next, we're going to hoop up a piece of nylon no-show mesh. You can use any color. I used beige here so you could see it a little bit easier in the photo, but you could use white, beige, or black. White's probably your best choice for quilting because it's the least expensive. Next, we're going to place our piece of batting in the hoop, centered as best as possible, and then we're going to load it into the machine, load in the design, and stitch out the first color, which should be black, which will stitch our outlines and placement lines. Once the lines have stitched out, they should look like this. So remove the hoop from the machine, and now we're going to stick our extra piece of batting down. So the first thing you want to do is very carefully peel the paper backing off of the Applique Wonder that we have ironed onto our extra piece of batting. Once that's done, then you want to carefully align it to the stitching lines and stick it down in place. Next, we're going to place our top fabric in the hoop and secure it at the very edges with 4 pieces of embroidery perfection tape. Next, you're going to load the hoop back in the machine, and then we're going to stitch out the next 2 colors. The first color will be our micro stippling, and I've chosen purple thread in my machine to match the background fabric. And then next we'll stitch out the feather, and in this case I chose a contrasting color of yellow. Once those 2 colors have stitched, you want to stop your machine, take the hoop out, and flip it over. And then carefully apply your backing fabric, making sure that it covers all of the stitches and a margin if you want to leave a margin. And then carefully tape it down using embroidery perfection tape. Now we're going to stitch the final color, which would be the purple again, to go around the outside of the feather and the outside of our block. And this again will also attach our backing fabric to the quilt block. When it's done stitching, remove the hoop from the machine, remove the quilt block from the hoop, and trim it as you want. In this case, I trimmed it right along the edge because I'm going to use a joining technique that does not use seam allowances, but if you prefer to have a seam allowance, of course, you would trim it that way. Finally, here's what the back of the quilt block looks like. Normally would use a matching thread to the fabric, but in this case I used white thread to give it some contrast so you could actually see what the stitching on the back looked like and how it attached the backing fabric. So this completes our project, showing you how to do punto in the hoop the Floriani way.